All right, Chapter 8, Diagramming to Identify Possible Factors. In this chapter, understanding the need for diverse and cross-functional teams in idea generation, conducting a brainstorming session, developing a fondness for affinity and fishbone diagrams, and using failure model effects analysis, FMEA, to identify potential factors. The Six Sigma problem solving approach requires that you objectively set aside your preconceived ideas about what the root cause of the problem may be. Instead, you explore and capture a list of all the factors that may, in some way, large or small, be contributing to the problem you're trying to solve. This chapter explores a few of the diagrams you can add to your toolkit for generating a comprehensive list of possible factors, the X's, that may be contributing to the performance of your project's critical output, the why. Whether you're generating ideas through brainstorming, fishbone diagrams, or failure mode effects analysis, FMEA, you need to be working in a cross-functional team setting to be most effective. It's extremely difficult for one person to come up with several possible ideas or to accurately or thoroughly identify process steps, their requirements, their potential failure modes, associated effects and causes, how often the causes occur, and how well the causes are prevented or detected. Instead, a cross-functional team from all stages and or perspectives of the process should participate together to effectively capture a viable list of possible inputs, the X's. An added benefit to the team approach is that as stakeholders participate in identifying possible X's within a process or product, they naturally invest themselves in the solution. Team-based idea generation builds consensus and removes resistance to change. So, while you're considering the different tools in this chapter, make sure you're doing so as a team. Breaking down brainstorming tools. At this point in your DMAIC project, the intent of your brainstorming is to generate and capture a list of all possible factors, the X's, that may be influencing the key output, the Y, of your project. The basic format for brainstorming is well known. You bring a group together and ask everyone to offer possible ideas on a topic. Effective brainstorming defers judgment. The goal is to gather as many ideas as possible, even unusual ones, and critiquing suggestions at this point will stifle the group's creativity. Two of the best brainstorming tools are affinity diagrams and fishbone diagrams, which we cover in the following sections. Affinity diagrams. An affinity diagram is a special form of a brainstorming session where the team members each write their ideas on sticky notes, one idea per note, and then place the notes on the wall. After everyone's notes are posted, the team members work together to group similar notes into natural categories. The resulting groupings can be insightful and revealing. Fishbone or Ishikawa diagrams. One of the most basic yet powerful brainstorming tools for capturing all the potential factors in your system is a fishbone diagram, named because of its bony fish-like shape. Sometimes a fishbone diagram is called an Ishikawa diagram, after Kaoru Ishikawa, who first suggested its use. If you want to sound clever, we suggest calling it a Fishikawa diagram. The information documented in your fishbone diagram is invaluable. A properly executed fishbone diagram forms the foundation of the analysis phase of the DMAIC project roadmap because it effectively captures a large number of potential inputs. A meager fishbone diagram makes the rest of your project that much harder. Figure 8-1 shows an example of a fishbone diagram. I think you're just going to have to get this book. A fishbone diagram is so simple that you can draw it on a whiteboard, a notepad, or even a lunch napkin. Start by placing the Y of your project, the key output, at the head of the fish. Then, to jumpstart your brainstorming, draw a backbone with 6 main bones coming off to the sides. These bones represent main categories of captured factors: man, machine, method, measurement, materials, and environment. These 6 main bone categories are just suggestions. Use whatever categories fit your situation. Some Six Sigma practitioners Add the categories of maintenance and management to their diagram. Some in the service industries use the categories of price, place, promotion, people, process, and physical evidence to better help them get started. Now, with your cross-functional team members, begin to think of any and all factors that may have an influence on the key output. Write each of these factors on a smaller bone on the fish skeleton as an offshoot of the appropriate category. See Figure 8-1. Ideas usually come in bunches as team members leapfrog off the suggestions of others. And pretty soon your team has dozens, if not hundreds, of ideas, identifying what factors may be influencing the key output. Focusing on failure mode effects analysis, FMEA. Failure mode effects analysis, FMEA, is a tool you can use to quantify and prioritize risk within a process, product, or system, and then track actions to mitigate that risk. Its value in Six Sigma is as a method for identifying and prioritizing which critical few factors you must address in order to improve the process in your DMAIC project. It's also a great tool for developing and carrying out the associated improvement plans. An FMEA is a tabulated list of the process steps with each step's potential failure modes, ways in which the process step may go wrong or not produce its desired or required outcome. Its associated effects and causes, how often the causes occur, and how well the causes are controlled, prevented, or detected. It basically looks like a large table, like the example shown in Figure 8-2 for the process of a pizza shop employee taking a pizza order over the phone. Figure 8-2. The rows in the FEMA table correspond to individual steps of the process you're analyzing. As you read from left to right in the table, you transition from listing the process step to that step's potential failure modes, the potential effects, the potential causes, and the current detection or prevention controls. For each row, you also provide a score for the severity of the effect, the frequency of occurrence of the cause, and the effectiveness of the current controls to detect or prevent the cause. The product of those scores creates the risk priority number, or RPN. Remember, by you, we mean your cross-functional team. For best results, all affected parties should have a role in hashing out the FMEA. For a Six Sigma DMAIC project, you should start an FMEA after you have defined the project and you have an initial understanding of the current process. An efficient FMEA effort doesn't try to start from a blank slate. Instead, it relies heavily on the previous completion of a process map of the current state. See Chapter 7 for info on process mapping. Other resources you can feed into an FMEA include compiled performance data from the process, fishbone diagrams listing potential process factors, existing process instructions or standards, and so on. The preceding section gives you the lowdown on fishbone diagrams. Although the overall flow of an FMEA is straightforward, the effectiveness of the method lies in rigorously following the guidelines for each of the detailed elements in order, which we explain step by step in the following sections. Listing process steps. Using a previously completed process flow map, list each process step or action in the column of the FMEA titled Process Steps or Product Functions. To check whether you're on the right track with your process step listing, look at the grammatical construction of the steps. Each listed step description should generally begin with a verb and end with an object. Machine outside diameter of part. Enter customer address, and so on. Using the verb object grammar check helps you make sure that your process steps are granular enough to properly identify risks. If you're doing an FMEA centered on the function of a finished product rather than on the execution of a process, just list each of the required product functions rather than the process steps. In the FMEA table shown in Figure 8-2, the initial steps for the pizza order and fulfillment process are listed in the far left column of the FMEA table. Notice that they all follow the recommended verb-object guideline. Identifying requirements and recording potential failure modes. For each process step, you must first think of its requirements. Identifying the process step's requirements is an intermediate step to accurately and comprehensively identifying the step's potential failure modes. The requirements are the additional criteria that determine the success of the step's execution. In the pizza order taking example, the first step is answer the phone. What is the requirement for this step? An employee may answer the phone after it rings for 5 minutes, but that likely isn't the level of customer service the restaurant is shooting for. The requirement, therefore, may be to answer the phone before the 5th ring. With the process steps requirement in mind, you then ask yourself what the potential failure modes may be. What constitutes failure to meet the requirement? For the requirement of answering the phone before the 5th ring, the failure mode is answer on or after the 5th ring. Note, this example is relatively simple. Most process steps will have multiple requirements. Take care not to get sidetracked by failure modes that aren't related to the requirement of your listed process steps. For example, a failure mode of phone call sound quality is poor may be legitimate, but it's not at all related to the answer within 5 rings requirement. These other requirements will be captured properly and detailed in another section of your FMEA. Let the FMEA method do the work for you. If you don't, the FMEA method becomes much more arduous. Spelling out effects of failures. The next step in the FMEA is to list the potential effects, yes, that's plural, effects, of each identified failure mode. See the preceding section. Simply list each individual effect in the same cell of the FMEA table, separating each individual effect with a plus or an and. Try to think thoroughly and realistically. What may happen if this failure mode occurs? Figure 8-2 lists the potential effects of not answering the pizza shop phone in time under the potential effects of failure column. To help think of effects, consider 2 aspects of the failure mode. First, think of how the failure mode may affect the flow of the process and internal customers. Second, think of how the failure mode may affect the end customer of the process. Pretty soon you get into the groove and can quickly create a comprehensive list of possible effects. Scoring the severity of the effects. Looking at your list of potential effects, you need to determine how severe of an impact the identified failure mode may have. You use a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being the most severe impact and 1 being the least severe. Table 8-1 shows a typical FMEA severity scoring scale. The first column shows the numeric scores. The second column is a verbal description of typical industry standard levels of severity from the Automotive Industry Action Group, AIAG. And the third column translates that AIAG language into more practical, customer-centered terminology. Note, the AIAG isn't an official authority on FEMA, but it's arguably FMEA's leading proponent. Because of that, most of the industry tries to follow the AIAG's lead when doing FMEA. Okay, this is table 8-1. I'm not going to read it out loud. There you go. Okay. For the combined list of effects in the pizza shop example of figure 8.8-2, the FMEA team needs to assign a score to each listed individual effect and then give an overall severity score based on the worst possible individual effect. In the pizza example, you may decide that the loss of future sales component of the effect is the worst and should be scored as, say, a 7. This score is the one that you assign to this grouping of potential effects. Listing causes of failure modes. After scoring the severity of the possible effects as we discussed in the preceding section, your cross-functional FMEA team brainstorms potential causes of the identified failure mode. Think of causes for the failure mode, not for the effect. In the pizza example, you need to think of causes for why the phone is answered on or after the 5th ring, not causes for why a customer hangs up or why a customer becomes disgruntled. Be sure to list potential causes of the failure mode in separate rows of your FMEA table, which usually means you have to insert new rows into your FMEA table, as shown in figure 8-2. Right here. Continued. Right there. Scoring the occurrence of the cause. The next important task is to determine how often each listed cause occurs with a 1 to 10 occurrence score. 10 represents a very frequent occurrence and 1 a very rare occurrence. Table 8-2. Oh, I totally lied. Figure 8-2 is what I should have showed you. This was figure 8-2. All right, we're going to talk about table 8-2 now. Okay. Table 8-2, which I just showed you, is a typical FMEA occurrence scoring scale. The second column includes information from the AI AG on the consequences of the frequency. And the last column gives information on a yield level associated with the frequency of occurrence. P sub pk is a measure of long-term process capability that we cover in chapter 13. Okay, so I'll show you table 8-2 again so you can see what P sub pk is, and it's this value. See, I have no clue beyond that. This stage is one where the participation of the cross-functional team is critical. Members of the team from different aspects of the process will have a good idea of how often each listed cause occurs. Has the listed cause ever happened before? About how many times over the last month? The last year? In the unlikely event that no one on the team knows how often a particular cause occurs, the team should go to Gemba, that is, the place where the work occurs, and to measure for themselves how often the cause is occurring. Figure 8-2 shows occurrence scores for each listed cause in the pizza order example. Okay. Identifying current controls. The next step in the FMEA process is for the team to identify what controls or protections are in place within the current configuration of the process to prevent the cause from happening, or at least to detect and provide an alarm when the cause does happen. Typical controls include operator training, process instructions, automated in-process inspection, and so on. Causes often have more than one control. In this case, list all the controls in one table cell and separate them with a plus or and. The controls for the example pizza order process are listed in figure 8-2 under the current controls column. Scoring the detection of the controls. Just as with the severity and occurrence scores we discussed earlier in the chapter, the cross-functional team now gives each listing of controls a score for the control's effectiveness at preventing or detecting the associated cause. This scale utilizes scores from 1 to 10, with 10 indicating no ability to prevent or detect, and 1 signifying perfect ability to prevent or detect. Table 8-3 lays out a typical detection scoring scale, with detection descriptions from the AI AG and associated inspection types typical of that detection score. This is table 8-3. Be careful not to accidentally flip the numbers. Oh wait, no, sorry, fake out. SPC refers to statistical process control, which is the method of using specialized statistical probability calculations to monitor and detect external influences on a system's performance. You can read more about SPC in Chapter 20. And now, be careful not to accidentally flip the numbers of the detection scale. Remember, a detection score of 10 is bad. It means you have no detection, while a score of 1 is good and indicates that you have perfect control. When giving detection scores, keep in mind that training, reminders, or even formal discipline of employees are an effective means of preventing or detecting causes of failure. When training or operator awareness is the only or the best available control, the detection score is usually given a fairly high score, maybe a 7 or an 8. Figure 8-2 lists the detection scores for the pizza order process. Calculating and reviewing RPN scores. With severity, occurrence, and detection scores for each row, see the preceding sections. You can calculate an overall composite risk priority number, or RPN. An RPN is simply the severity score multiplied by the occurrence score multiplied by the detection score. The lowest possible RPN is 1. 1 times 1 times 1. While the highest is 1,000. 10 times 10 times 10. With the FMEA filled out for each process step and with an RPN for each row, the cross-functional team can quickly identify where risk currently resides within the process. Because the RPN is a composite score, rows in the FMEA table that have same or similar RPNs may need to be addressed very differently. Be intelligent in your review. One process step with a particular score may require action to reduce the occurrence, while another with the same score may require improved detection. Devising and assigning improvement actions. The far right-hand column of the FMEA table is for coming up with improvement actions that will improve the current risk situation. These actions may include taking additional data or measurements to more accurately understand an occurrence of a specified cause or implementing improved detection actions. You can record these assignments and target completion dates directly into the FMEA with revised severity, occurrence, and detection scores. The right side of figure 8-2 shows assigned improvement actions and revised severity, occurrence, and detection scores to reflect the improved situation. And once more, for your benefit, is figure 8-2. Cannot get it to focus. Stupid camera.